Welcome to the NLP for Kids video for parents and professionals. Today I'm going to be talking to you about how you can minimize the level of drama that your young people are experiencing just by using your voice. So sometimes it is not appropriate to sit down with your young person and do a formal kind of intervention. Maybe you're just not in the right time and the right place to be able to make that happen. So it's a real skill for you to be able to develop the art of change using just your conversation. Let me give you an example of what I am talking about. In the past, I've had parents bring their little offspring to see me for many different challenges. And sometimes what happens is the family get caught in a loop of speaking very dramatically about a problem that the child is experiencing. Now, I think the reason why that happens is because everyone is struggling and frightened and in pain, and it comes out in their language. However, the downside of this is that sometimes what starts out as a small problem begins to escalate and grow because the vocabulary that is used around it can really start to enhance the problem rather than actually do anything about it. Let me give you an example. So just yesterday, and in fact I talk about it on another podcast, the People Building podcast, but I had made a post about a film that I'd been to see at the cinema, and I was sharing it with other people. The majority of people also really enjoyed the film, but one person commented that they found it sickening. Now, this was, in my opinion, quite strong language to use in reference to a musical about the circus. I would use sickening to describe murder, perhaps, and it wasn't as bad as that. But sometimes people use their vocabulary to really emphasize how they're experiencing the world, but at the same time, it can have the detrimental effect of making things seem much more severe than perhaps they really are. Once upon a time, I had a parent who brought their child to see me because he had choked on some food and then started to become almost a bit phobic-like about eating after that point. He was insisting that he should only have soft foods, that he would be able to eat without fear of choking again. Now, this was a one-off event, and it wasn't particularly serious in that he had a few slaps on the back and the food came up. So there was no ambulance called, nothing like that. It didn't necessarily have to become a trauma. However, for this young chap, it did. And I believe that part of the reason why that happened was because of the language that his family were using when they were talking about the problem. So, for example, his father said that he began choking and gagging. So not just choking, but gagging as well. Fair enough. As a result of that choking and gagging, he stopped breathing. Now, most people stop breathing when they're choking, or at least they can inhale but not get the air back out again. That's just the physiological reaction towards choking. So at this point, I was quite alarmed and asked how long the child had stopped breathing for, and the parent at that stage pointed out it was a couple of seconds. So again, nothing too unusual about that in relation to an incident of choking. But the fact that this was now being repeated in front of the child was sort of embedding the severity of the situation. The parent went on to explain to me that everyone was kind of standing up around the table and slapping the child on the back in an effort to force this food out. So language like effort and force makes it sound like it's a much more severe situation than perhaps it needed to be. Now, I'm not saying that it wasn't a frightening experience. Having a child choke on your watch is a terrifying experience, but there isn't much to be gained by freaking out. The best thing you can do is relax and stay calm and just follow the drill of what you need to do in order to stop the child from choking. After the incident, what is useful to do is to get them to have a sip of water and then crack on with eating their food. But these parents reacted in such a way that they encouraged the child to take a break. They didn't have to eat the rest of the food if they didn't want to. They could go home, and they really put a lot of effort into overly comforting the child and I'm sure with worried expressions on their faces, and then recounted the story to other family members later, and several other times in front of the child again. So overall, the situation grew and grew and grew to the extent that the child was no longer able to eat normal food anymore. Here's an example of the sort of thing that you can do in order to shrink the dramatization of a situation like that, because let's face it, it's not always on the parents and professionals around those young people. Young people themselves are pretty darn good at creating some drama sometimes. So let's imagine it's the next day and your young person comes downstairs and they say, I don't think I can eat normal food after I choked yesterday. A response could be one that starts with the level of drama that they're currently at, but as you speak, and we start with where they're at so that we can pace with them, so that we're on the same page as them. If we minimized it too quickly, then they might feel like we're not really listening or that we don't have enough respect for them. So we always start with where they're at, and then we're gradually going to minimize it from there. So we could respond with something like, I know that the choking incident yesterday was really terrifying. However, when you were coughing, it was lucky that that only lasted for just a few seconds. Fortunately, you were completely okay afterwards, and your throat's probably feeling an awful lot better by now. Had you noticed that already, that your throat is starting to feel better than it did immediately after the incident? As the day goes on, you're going to feel better and better about what happened yesterday. And you've had years and years experience of being able to eat without any problems. I'm sure you're not going to let a one-off incident throw you off track for too long. So throughout the course of what we're saying there, we're shrinking down the problem more and more, so that by the time we get to the end of saying what we're saying, we've really neutralized the problem completely. Might we get some kickback from that? Yeah, we might do realistically, in which case we just follow the process again. Start with where they're currently at and shrink it down from there, paying extra attention to the tone of your voice so that it becomes more relaxed and casual sounding the more that you speak, and also the type of vocabulary that we're using. So choking becomes coughing, and the moment of the thing happening becomes in the past and something that didn't last for too long. So start thinking about how it is that you can minimize the dramas that your young people are experiencing simply by conversational techniques. Minimize and distort the situation in a positive and useful way so that they can start to feel more empowered and on top of their situation, and you can start to minimize and diffuse the drama. Thank you so much for watching and listening today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and you subscribe yourselves now before you leave. I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.